data. Recording, okay. Specific to open government RAD, we haven't presented in a while, so I wanted to kind of highlight what we are, who we are, and how to get a hold of us, that sort of thing. So really, we're meant to be a data-driven group, and the idea is that when people say burden or workload, that we kind of consider those areas of business process or challenges within the work that we can do something to investigate, pull together data that supports some of that burden or knocks down narratives and folklore, but helps us hone in on what the real problems are and potentially inform other groups with information that they can take action on if we don't take that on ourselves. So previously, we've had an example of that where we tackled letter of credit, which was a very common activity across every institution. And individually, it didn't seem like a lot of burden, but when you dug into what it looks like for all the individual institutions to execute on that very basic business process, that there was a lot of complications along the way that was causing burden. And we went ahead and developed a survey, collected the evidence, presented the evidence, and that's launched quite a few conversations. We were engaged with the government directly for a while, kind of shaping business process improvements, especially when the cryptocurrency conversation was hot. And we know that that information has continued to influence discussions ongoing. So what we'd like to do is, really hone in on the scope of analysis and focus on something very acute, and then get to that quantifying of the issue, and then make that demonstratable and going from kind of a what is it that we're looking at, and how would we go about improving. So if you want to know more about the LOC work, it's out on our subcommittee website. The website is here, and you can go look at that along with the rest of our background and updates for the current activities that we're going to be talking about here shortly. So we currently are made up of 3 co-chairs, and with an NSF representation specifically. We have volunteers and a call for volunteers always, so please consider the listserv and making contact with us either directly or through the listserv. We have a couple of volunteers that are pending, and the only reason they aren't a part of our larger group at the moment is just because we haven't been able to get to onboarding and kind of circling back to them to do them justice as far as getting involved. And that's something we would do for anybody that's interested, is really kind of talk background, talk current work, and talk additional ideas, and get you involved as much as we can. So with that, wanted to catch you up on what's happening with the FDP HERD working group, HERD survey working group, which is a survey of the HERD survey. So the HERD survey, we've always kind of kicked around the fun way of going about talking about that, but it's really to try to understand the work that's involved across each individual institution to complete the HERD survey. And then I think it eventually evolves to talking about the process involved, along with the data that's involved, how hard it is to collect the data, the quality of the data, that sort of thing. So this group is digging into that. And I won't go through the introductions here. I'll let them introduce themselves, but they have quite a work group going at this point. So they are underway. The discussion has been great. NSF is involved and a participant, which makes the discussion even more well-rounded. So kudos to them. Last time we talked about this, it was just an idea that was being hatched, and now it is underway and something that's actually happening, and just a great conversation going on with deliverables coming. Additionally, we have the Research Profile Optimization Study, the RPOS, and this group is coming in hot from the FAC session that they were just in. I would characterize what they just did in fact as kind of a redo of the May meeting, but it included Carmen Scholz, the PI, who's a co-lead on this effort, who presented her section, which she wasn't able to do in May due to vacation. But I think it really sets the tone and the stage to bring that PI's perspective on how we go about doing some of these things and how burdensome it could be. So to have that voice included and to kind of set the stage today was great. So again, coming in from the FAC session, it's the what were they trying to do, and now they're going to talk a little bit more about transitioning from what to how we might go about some of this, and the idea that the herd survey is a little further along in getting up and running and doing the actual work that they anticipate might inform some of the RPOS as they try to get their effort started. So I'm hopeful that that's a good enough setup for folks, and I'd like to turn it over to Angie and Jenn to get us started on the herd survey.
Thank you, Rick, and thank you to all the working group members too that might be on this in the meeting today. Your insight has been invaluable, and really just I think I'm speaking to the choir, so to speak, about the importance of the herd survey to all the research institutions, and that it's the only national survey that persistently and consistently collects data on research expenditures for institutions of higher education, and many institutions have to choose the best way to map the data to the questions in the herd survey, and that's kind of what we're really digging into. Not only what does it take to quantify this data, or the time that it takes to for the workload to quantify the data, but also what are some of the best practices that we might hear about that the survey could help the greater community understand. And it'll also, like I said, allow the members to learn best practices, provide support for research administrators tasked with the survey. And we also are really indebted probably to Michael Gibbons from NSF for also being an advisor, as well as Avi in our group. It really does help make the conversation well-rounded, like Rick said. Next slide, Rick. And just to introduce ourselves, I'm Angie Rochat. I'm the Assistant Vice Provost for Research at Loyola Marymount University. And my role at the institution about the survey is really I assist in reviewing the data. Does it look right? That type of thing. Our post-award accounting office really puts all the data together. We are R2 institution, so it's really important to us looking at this data, and somewhat new to us, the importance of it in terms of it is part of our president's strategic plan. So one thing about Jenn and I is I am at an R2 institution, and I'll let Jenn introduce herself. She's at an R1 institution, and we really want to have participation in our working group from both types of institutions.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Jenn Garye. I'm the Director of Business Operations at Florida State University. I've been with Florida State for 18 years now and working in research administration for 9 of those. All of them actually somewhat involved in the herd survey in some way, shape, or form. Currently at my institution, I'm primarily responsible in reviewing the survey, but also in working with our systems teams to determine what data elements need to be captured in order to report out on the survey. I have had the fun endeavor of compiling the survey in my past as well, but currently have passed that on to an analyst happily. Rick, you can go to the next slide. So to kind of recap a little bit of what Angie has led us to, we have a large working group, which we're very grateful for. We currently have 40 participants. I say currently because we are always recruiting. So if you are a herd data nerd, as we describe ourselves, and are interested in getting involved in the project, please reach out. We represent 39 different institutions. As Angie mentioned, we really wanted to make sure that we brought a diverse perspective. So we've got 26 R1 institutions, as well as 13 R2 institutions, and really hoping that we can ferret out perspective from institutions of all size. And that is really informing us of how we need to compile the survey as we work together with this group. It's also quite interesting the roles that we have represented. So we have everywhere from data analysts who are responsible for actually compiling the data sources, to directors of sponsored programs who oversee the preparation perhaps, to associate and assistant VPs who approve the survey or push us to determine what can be included in the surveys that we're completing. And interestingly, we also have a professor of economics that is part of our working group. He also happens to be a member of the sponsored programs office. But often you'll hear, the HERD survey is cited at the federal level to really discuss the R&D impact economically on our country. And so it's really interesting to have an economics professor involved in this working group and providing that perspective to us. And as Angie mentioned, not only are we fortunate to have Avi from NSF as part of the OG RAD, Michael Gibbons has been participating. He is with the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics, which is who gives us this wonderful survey to complete, compiles all of the wonderful reports that come out of it. And so he's attended a couple of our working group sessions at this point, and he's actually been able to answer some questions and provide some perspective, as well as take some feedback from the group about, burden that has been placed by particular questions or how, questions or responses are given. So it's been a real blessing to have his participation in the project.
So thank you for that, Rick. Now at the timeline, we have one thing about our timeline is we did readjust the timeline. The feedback that the working group gave us in the first couple meetings was really, would we consider adjusting it to when the HERD survey comes out so that it's forefront on people's minds and that we can really get some good responses. So we did that. And right now, we are on track that we're happy to report. We are right there in our August through October where we're really, refining our questions, and throughout the summer and before that, we really kept getting feedback from people. What do they want to hear in the survey? What would help? What are some questions they would like to propose? So we are excited about where we're at. We're hopeful to continue on that trajectory. Jenn, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, just kind of in follow-up to regarding the adjustment on the timeline. So you'll see that we're distributing it in November, which is when many people are compiling the survey. This will allow them to see the questions that are included while they're actually preparing it. But we're not asking for the survey to be completed necessarily at the same time, because we know that you're busy with the actual survey preparation. And so you'll have until March to actually provide your responses to the survey. So next slide. So as Angie mentioned, we've spent the first part of this project really starting to identify what buckets or areas of focus we wanted to address as part of our HERD survey workload assessment. And so we came up with 4 kind of topic areas, if you will. I'm going to start and discuss the first 2, and then Angie will discuss the latter. So the first one was personnel related. And if you prepare the survey, no, this is not related to question 15 and 16, which we all dread regarding FTE and head counts, but more about the personnel that are actually putting together the survey. And so we're looking at, how many people are involved in compiling this, both from an FTE standpoint as well as a head count, because that varies greatly across our working group. We're looking at the offices involved. For example, we have some offices where, one institution perhaps they have a single office, their sponsored programs office compiles the entire report. Others, it's handled within their controller's office or institutional research, and then yet others where many offices are involved with various components of the survey. And so we're trying to get a feel here for the breadth that's involved in compiling the amount of data necessary. And then we're looking at the roles. Are these, data analysts working on this? Are there managers that are involved in approving? Are there, ICSs like ERP type teams? So really trying to ferret down to what types of roles are involved in the survey process from start to finish. And then from there, the approving authority. I think, and Michael has acknowledged, NSF would like to think that the questions are black and white. But again, if you have any involvement in this, there's a large amount of gray and room for interpretation, and not to mention how your data is exported from your system. So really looking at who's your approving authority on the survey. And these are just a few examples. We've got several questions related to the personnel effort in putting together the survey that we hope to paint a picture with. The second topic we're focusing on is systems related. And this isn't necessarily what ERP system does your school use, as much as what are the sources of the data or the reports? Are you using financial statements? Are you using your CFA reports? We're also looking at, is it one system? Do you have a centralized ERP system that provides all of the data? Do you have a disparate system that you have to get from multiple sources who may own those systems? Are you asking for self-reporting from your colleges or departments? And so where really is the source of the data coming from to complete the survey? And then, as many of you probably know, our leadership are asking for kind of status updates, I like to call them, on your herd number throughout the year. So no longer just wanting that one nice report that we all get to complete in November, December, but asking us where are we at throughout the year. And so we're looking at how much of this compilation may be automated at institutions. I think it's something we're all interested in, but again, with the compilation of the data, is that possible to provide some automation? Then we're touching on methodology. This is related both to just kind of the standard operating procedure of how you actually put the data together, but also the methodology and how you determine what's in the survey. So do you have clear methodology documented to determine, when there is that gray area, yes, we're including this, no, we're not, and here's why. Which, we've all discussed is not necessarily documented at every institution, but certainly important when you start getting into those variances that NSF asked you about. And then from there, it's data elements used. So again, it's very difficult to report on something on the back end if you're not collecting that data on the front end. So anything from, purpose codes to types of research, how are you identifying in those data elements on the front end for reporting? So again, just a kind of sample of the types of questions that we're looking at related to personnel and systems. Next.
Sorry, we have a little work going on in the background. Anyway, the questions on the survey are questions about that people have about the survey, and especially those institutional expenses that are so difficult. What do you include? What do you not include? I would say right now we are so excited. We have a list of 12 types of institutional expenses that people include, and again, we're adding to that all the time. The classification of expenses, think how do people classify basic, applied, and what are the processes or that they use, and also the inability to answer specific questions. I know that I've been at smaller institutions than R2, and we had no ability to answer anything except our sponsor research. And so I think that's really important also, to understand what questions that people might be struggling with, and how we might help with that. And then the other bucket that we have is just how people are responding to variances. Are the variances too high, too low? How do those work? Validation, who validates the report? It came up again and again in some of our working groups, whose responsibility is that? And the last one is the use of the results. Our colleague Baron Wolf and his project at the University of Kentucky, they've really done a deep dive on using the results and using analytics to display those results. And so we're not diving in as deep on that. Ours is more focused on how do you make the numbers? How do you create the data? Next slide, Rick.
So as Angie mentioned, Baron Wolf, who actually is a member of our working group as well, has been working on an NSF project regarding, the title is Research Analytics Using the Higher Education Research and Development Survey to Impact Institutional Strategy. It's so catchy, I just feel like I had to say it all, sorry. But he is really focused on what are we doing with the results of this data. So, right, our leadership is pressing us for, frequent updates, but what are we doing? Are we making true strategic decisions with that data? And so that's been the primary focus. And not only that, I think should we and how should we be focused on the use of the data and the outcome? And so he held a workshop in August regarding his project, including the scope framework, which is part of the European framework for analyzing institutional outcomes. And Angie and I participated in that, both to learn from his project, which is very interesting. And I highly encourage you, he'll be publishing results here in the near future to look at his findings. But we also wanted to participate in order to inform this project. And so we want to clearly make sure that we are complementing the work that he is doing and not duplicating, because we know a lot of the FDP members actually participated in providing the survey responses with his report as well. So that's a clear plug if you're not reading between the lines, that if you did the survey regarding Baron's project, please don't ignore the FDP one when it rolls out, because it will look very different than the data that he was capturing. And not only did we use that to kind of inform our project, but we also used it to recruit. And so we picked up a few more working group members at that workshop, which was very, very beneficial. So very much looking forward to his published results, but definitely looking to complement his project.
All right. And back one, Rick. Thank you. We also had some hosted 2 discussion groups at Ankara, one at the annual meeting that happened this August and one previously. And we had about 20 to 30 participants in each group, and they really also dug in deep, and we asked them kind of the same questions, gave them some feedback on what we're hearing in our working group and what they might also want to hear more about. And it was interesting. About a third of the people in the last Encourage discussion group were brand new, just were given the HERD survey to complete at their institution without any methodology to follow. And so they were really excited to hear that the best practices or more information might be shared about putting the survey together, what goes into creating the survey from other institutions. I think that's it. Next slide, Rick.
So what's next? Is that you, Angie? Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Jen.
Okay, so we will continue our monthly meetings that we have set up. We're currently using shared documents to wordsmith the questions, if you will, that we have in draft form. And so we'll continue meeting monthly and working on that in real time together collaboratively online. And then our next goal is to hit that timeline to distribute the survey in November. So as Angie mentioned, we're right on track with that, and keep an eye open in your inbox. Any questions that we can help answer? Or if you're interested in joining our working group, our email addresses are there, as well as I think published through FTP's summary, so feel free to reach out.
I don't see anything in the chat, but if folks want to raise their hand and chime in, please feel free. Otherwise, I'll prime the pump with, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but on the participation slide, I didn't see ERIs, and I know the conversation in this space for completing the herd survey has a size component to it, which is size matters in the sense that it takes FTE, it takes resources to get it together. So is there room for, say, ERIs, or is it just they haven't volunteered, or how does that space look like?
Well, most of the R2s are ERIs.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
Yeah, so and anything smaller than a R2 is not a FDP member. So we did recruit from the ERI listserv at the FDP, but again, we'd like to have more. LMU is technically a ERI as a R2.
Great.
Yeah. But thanks, I will clarify that, Rick, and double check.
Yeah, sure. That's just my lack of understanding on categorizations altogether. I just know that we promote ERIs, and I know that getting the herd data together is always a challenge based on how many folks you have available to work on it, especially when you want to make it repeatable and answer questions and that sort of thing. A second point to the UK work and Baron Wolf, I attended the Research and Analytics Conference, which was really an attempt to get RNA discussions going, and the herd report is at the center of that analysis. I think he's going to have a follow-up one, but really making the case for RNA roles and RNA offices to some degree. So I think I see a convergence there between the folks that are asked to bring this data together and then the analytics on this data, and how those two could pair up to make this easier as part of the discussion as well. So. Anybody else? I don't see any hands and I don't see any comments.
I'll take that to mean we just answered all their questions.
Well, somebody just came off mute, so Cindy Chipman. Is that just an accidental unmuting, Cindy? Yep. All right, then we'll move on to our next topic. Are you ready, David and Carmen? Excellent. And I should say thank you very much, Angie and Jenn, for putting that together. The progress you've made has been great, and just sitting in on the conversations, it's not so much folks beating up the herd survey itself and saying why it's problematic or a challenge, but more of really the talking about what it's made of, what the results mean to us, what better results can mean to us, and that sort of thing. So it's really progressive and really trying to move the analytical conversation around that data forward. And I'm done.
Okay. So I guess I'm starting out here. For the folks in the audience, this is a little bit of an unusual situation because we just gave that presentation to the fact group. So if you have heard our presentation, please go and get yourself a cup of coffee. Next slide. My name is Carmen Scholz. I am a professor of chemistry in the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And I will set the stage for our presentation, and David Dreisbach will then lay out the details of the survey and some of the initial works and achievements. So I want to stress that I am a professor, I'm a researcher, and the setting of the stage comes from a very selfish point of view, saying what we, the professors, the researchers, want for the administration to do for us. So bear with me on this one. And next slide. So we're talking about grants, we are talking about proposals. These proposals need to be written. And when a professor and I write a proposal, the technical part is actually the fun part. It's a smooth, it's a quiet process. And, it's really fun to develop new ideas and think about what is possible, what could be done. I'm a chemist, so new chemical reactions, and will they work? And can you convince a reviewer that it actually works? And all these things. So that is the fun part. And then next, we come to the less scientific parts of data management plans, postdoc mentorings, individual development plans for graduate students. And things get dicey because I'm not quite sure sometimes what I'm supposed to say. A development plan for a graduate student on a proposal, I don't even know yet which graduate student is working on this project if it gets funded. We may not have admitted that graduate student just yet. So this is getting a little more challenging. And then next, we come to budgets, biographical sketches, current and pending, collaborators, and that is really where the professors, unless they are in a university that provides a very strong research support infrastructure, that's where professors go nuts or are driven to tears or whatever is going to happen. So, because this is not our wheelhouse, I can write about chemistry. I'm not sure which biographical sketch I am supposed to find in the almighty internet. This is currently Science CV or Orchid or not my thing to do. I'm really not computer savvy, as many of my colleagues, only I guess the next generation of professors is more computer learned than I am. But let's go on what we are dreaming of. And that is a dream house for researcher profile data information, a repository for the researcher profile. So this is the house that I would like to have. And next. So what goes in here? A biosketch, okay? I'm only one person. I only have one biography. So I want a biosketch that is acceptable for all federal funding agencies, because my biography does not change if I go from NSF to the Department of Energy or someplace else. It is just me, my education, my publications. So ideally, there should be only one biosketch data format. Next. Okay, my collaborators. Yes, that's important information, especially in these days where we have to look at research security. And Mark Hasselkorn from the University of Washington has elaborated on that in great detail. But my collaborators are always the same. They don't change. I have the same collaborators. So there should be one form, and that is accepted by all funding agencies. Next. Here is the scholarly and creative work. So my publications. There's a certain list of publications, and I'm adding to it. It should be added to the house. And I should have the possibility to pick and choose. If I have to add 5 publications for a certain proposal, okay, I pick those 5. But they are in the repository, all of them. Next. Then we have the institutional core facilities. Well, that's another thing that doesn't change. My department has a set of instrumentation, and yeah, we are really happy if we can add to this set of instrumentation, but trust me, it's not that easy to get $1 million for another NMR or other machine like that. So yes, that is a list that should be held in the house because there are only minute changes made to it over the time. Next. And then there's the proposal itself. So all proposal information, the title, the budget, especially, that should be captured automatically in this house, and it should be sorted. When I submit it, it's pending. And then next, it should sort itself into either become current, so feeding in my list of current and pending, or it should should fall off the system if the proposal is rejected. So all of these information are for me, for my house, about my professional biography. Now, ideally, next, This entire information should also be available and coupled back to the institution and automatically populate in institutional documents, accreditation, faculty evaluation. Some schools have post-tenure evaluations, institutional research. I'm here for 25 years, and I think I have been asked 20 times to verify that I have a PhD. If this dream house would exist and hold all my information and could be technically made in such a way that it talks back to the institution, then my burden would be significantly reduced. So that's the dream house. Now, what do we see? Yeah, that's what I feel sometimes. Hair on fire, house on fire, total chaos. Yes, Rick, please get rid of that slide. There we go. So in order to construct this house, that is where we need to understand what researchers and administrators experience when they manage these profiles. Is there differences amongst universities in infrastructure for research? Oh, sure there is. How broad is the spectrum? How much diversity is there? What do federal agencies want? Do they all want the same? No, they don't. But keep in mind, it's only me and my CV, and it will not change between the agencies. So can we find a common denominator that says that is the information that is good and sufficient for all federal agencies? So with this information, and this is what David will talk about here in a minute, so I'm just setting the stage. How do we get these data? How do we evaluate these data? How do we get to them? So that at the end, we can build a neighborhood that ensures that we have a high quality researcher profile information in place in each and every house of every researcher. And then we can reduce the traffic between the houses, because all my information is in my house. And if I apply to NSF, it should shuttle over to NSF. Okay, so we can take a look at the neighborhood next. So here's our neighborhood. And you see there are the houses for the individual researchers. And next, here are the funding agencies. Yes, each one of them has lots and lots of dollars, and every little house wants to get some of those dollars. So how do we manage this process? In order to get this in an orderly fashion, we need some regulations. Next. Oh, hold on. Didn't get to the regulations yet. I have to talk about where we reside. So these are the entities that are affected, implemented, and participate. There are the universities that are very, and then there are the national labs. They may be a little bit closed. And then there are the publishers, where our work gets disseminated. And as we have heard before, publishers are also in this neighborhood situation, because they have to deal with their own research security issues. You know, think about proprietary journals that are unethical. We have plenty of that, unfortunately. So this is the neighborhood that we created, and now we can get to the regulations. Next. So here are the regulations indicated by these traffic lights. And finally, we need some interaction. We need a shoveling of data, a shoveling of information that needs to be effective. Next. Yes. So I put a Lamborghini in there so that the data transport is really, really fast. If we had this environment in place, then the burden on the faculty would be dramatically reduced. That is at least my conviction. And in order to make any of this neighborhood work, we need the data and we need them to be evaluated. And that is David's wheelhouse. And I pass it on to David.
So thank you, Carmen. And I know that you are a chemistry professor, but you also have a wheelhouse of visualizing things that I think I don't know if my slides are going to be as entertaining and as good as yours are, but I think that's
David, I'm teaching for 25 years now.
Yeah.
I know how to deal with convincing people that they should understand.
Yeah, and so I think that the way you've articulated this is great, and it's great to work with you in this process as a faculty member. I'm an administrator at the Florida International University, and as I look at this, I guess I've been building houses here at our institution and trying to connect them up on behalf of our research population. And so what we're going to talk a little bit for the remainder of this is what we consider maybe as a solution to try to help build out part of what you see here. And as we look at the conversations of this week at FDP, there are a lot of other there's lots of converging activities that we think that what we're going to talk about could help. And if you could go to the next slide, Rick.
David, it might be that if you don't have a Lambo, that could be part of the problem. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I'm driving a Subaru. So anyhow, all right. So we have the solution, we call it the research profile optimization study. I'm going to talk about that a bit. When I say we think that FDP is a great venue for this project. I'm going to talk about how it's been in the works for a little bit of time now. I'm going to give you all that weren't on the session in May or this session before is just an overview of it real quick. And then as Rick mentioned, we'll try to dive a little bit into maybe some practical discussion about things after today. But in general, as I was mentioning, a lot of discussions the last couple of days, there's this topic about research security. There's a session earlier today about AI. There are a lot of progress that's been made in Science CV to get information into different places effectively, and that part of that came out of FDP as a group. And so the question is, what are things that FDP can do to help seize on a lot of these things that are happening at the same time? And we think that this study can help that. And so what we're proposing is in line with facilitating other efforts like Science CV and research security. And basically the aim of it is that we believe that across all of these things, one thing that we all should strive for is high quality researcher profile information. It doesn't necessarily mean having all of that information necessarily in just one system, but we believe the goal should be to get high quality research information system throughout the neighborhood, right, throughout the ecosystem. And so ultimately what we're proposing, and I'm going to get into that, is what information do we need at FDP to try to help facilitate that progress towards an infrastructure where high quality information could be disseminated to different places within the institutions as well as within the federal agencies. So that's what we're hoping this project will achieve as an outcome. So next slide, please. So 30,000-foot level of this, what we think at this point, we should say that this has not yet formally been approved by the FDP, and we'll get into that. But ultimately, what we're thinking at this point in time, and as I hear the presentation earlier from Angie and so forth, we definitely would be learning a lot as we go through once this gets approved, right? But ultimately, we're thinking that there will be 3 activities from this project. One at the bottom is a data assessment, right? So we want to understand how much the information that is being requested of researchers and the institutions about the researchers in the context of applying for federal funding. How much does that vary by agency? And so that is more of a data activity. And so part of OG-RAD, I think, as Rick mentioned earlier, is to try to look at data at a granular level. That would be an activity to try to understand the variability. We'd also have 2 surveys. That's what we're thinking, and these may be sequenced and so forth, but ultimately 1 survey, top left-hand corner, is to try to better understand what are some of the shared experiences of researchers and administrators in the context of providing this information. And also on the right-hand side, a survey that would help us collectively understand what are the characteristics of the infrastructures that are involved at the institutional level, and how much can they vary as it relates to providing this information and as part of applying for federal funding. So this is what we're looking at a high level in terms of outputs. Next slide. And then regarding scope, again, this topic is huge, right? But what we were hoping to do, at least scope down, which is still a significant scope, looking at researcher profile information and defining it as the information that's in a biographical sketch, in the current pending, or in the collaborator or other affiliation forms across the federal agencies that are members of FDP. Next slide. So we believe that if we were able to do 2 good surveys and do this data variation analysis that were in the other slide, that should help us understand collectively how much does the information vary across the institution, across the federal agencies, the quality of the information, right? How much effort does it take for each institution or different perspective to provide this information to the federal government? Also understanding how does it vary across the universities, the infrastructures? As I was saying in the previous presentation, at our institution, when it comes to populating certain sections of the ORCID, we have some very good data and statistics, and we can say what percentage of our faculty have ORCID and how many of them have made connections that we've automated data for them. But when it comes to our current and pending, we have a project that we're trying to improve that. So I think understanding the variation of university infrastructures is something we're hoping that the surveys could help us do and help us identify where there could be some best practices in all of this, right? Because we recognize that the institutions, R1s, R2s, all have different levels of infrastructure, and we're hoping that we'll find some easy low-hanging fruit that will help all different types of institutions in terms of best practices. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this is, we're hoping to provide information from this project that will help facilitate other efforts, right? So Science CV, we are an advocate for Science CV. We believe we want to help them tell the story of the success and the time that it can save a faculty member if they go through certain steps, or the institution maybe to become an ORCID affiliated member, the benefits, and help them ultimately plan institutionally as well as with what's happening at the federal level. And there's other initiatives like the Research Secure project that we talked about within the fact session. We think that some of this information that we can gather can help that community to understand more about the variation of in the uses of researcher profile information. So next slide. So this has been a bit of a journey, and I think one of the nice things about how this has come about, I see and I really appreciate the leadership here with Rick and Stephanie and Avi on here, and we've also had great participation and leadership from Stephen Post and the FAC group. And the RSTC, we've got Lori Scholz and David Saunders. So our thought is that if this were to get approved, that the project would, take the leadership of these 3 areas to help us navigate FDP and be successful. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there was a bit of a history here, and I would go back, even a few years before that, where I think, Rick, I remember you presenting, a lot of your spreadsheets with open government and so forth. And I remember being in the audience and say, this would be great to get to this certain level of detail because of the stuff that we're working on our institution as it relates to researcher profiles. And so we submitted an original proposal back in 2023. We didn't have the faculty lead that we had wasn't able to continue. And then Carmen sent an email, which will be famous maybe, complaining about some of her experiences with Science CV. And, Rick forwarded it to me, right? And because Rick was hanging out in the fact group. And then we immediately called Carmen. And then I think since then, it's been a great series of collaborations that have happened since then, where now we've had multiple presentations, January and May, we've had presentations, and now we've had these today. I also mentioned we also developed during the spring of last year a charter that's much more detailed, that gives some of the what's in the slides here at a more detailed level. So that's the history, and what we're hoping right now is that if all goes well, that this would get approved this month by the executive committee. So next slide. And this is just a picture of the proposal that we would be filling out. So I don't think we need to spend too much time on this. I guess this slide wasn't necessary. So again, we're at the initiation phase, right, where we want to formalize, this within FDP. We know that we would be entering into a planning phase. And I think what we would look for, even in this discussion today, what we hope that throughout the fall, we would be getting interest from you all that are here that want to be in some form or fashion. I was envious of the number of working group members that were in the HERD group. I think it was like 40 or so. So that's amazing. I mean, we would be looking over the fall to try to identify volunteers, different perspectives, also just dive in and scrutinize a bit more what we're thinking in terms of sequencing these outputs and defining the outputs and scoping things correctly. But the hope would be that by the spring and summer of next year, we would be doing that data assessment that I mentioned earlier, plus some of the surveys. We would be designing them in collection with a number of different stakeholders. Ultimately, with the hope that in the fall, we would start to get those surveys approved and disseminated, where we can have in the spring of 2026 some good data, which then I think, again, will help a lot of other concurrent initiatives, but I think it'll just help set the path for other FDP priorities, because I think we'd have a lot of good information from all of this. So this is what we're thinking at this point. And that's, I think, it from a sort of what we think at this stage in terms of timeline. So I don't know, Rick, if you want to maybe start asking a couple of questions and then we dive into it, or
sure.
Open it up for questions in general, I guess, right?
Yeah, I think there's one comment that I would like to highlight. So there's only one comment, but that comment is pretty relevant in the sense that Carmen really set the stage for the use case that's behind this. And to your slide with the circles and the coming together, RSTC is the tech that collects the data that is behind a lot of this. The fact group with the faculty participation and allowing us not only to recruit one, but two faculty members to represent that use case is pretty important. So these things playing off of each other, leading to what will hopefully be a collection of a lot of evidence that can influence future endeavors to improve the data quality, make some of this stuff a lot easier, to me is really powerful. And just trying to think about how, if your ball gets rolling, playing across these three groups can really pay some dividends if we ask the right questions, get the right kind of survey out there, and get people kind of understanding the landscape, and then future contributions can all be towards the betterment of that. But I don't think what you're promising is a chicken in every pot, meaning everybody gets a Lambo at the end of this.
No, I think that we are trying to build, set the stage for high quality information that can facilitate Lamborghinis being built.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, is that we're not advocating for one particular. I mean, we believe in systems like Science CV, ORCID. We believe in repurposing data. We believe in research information management systems. We believe in a lot of that stuff, but we're not necessarily going to advocate just for one. We're just trying to collect good information to facilitate good information about throughout all of those systems.
Well, I would encourage anybody that wants to chime in to please raise your hand, and I'll keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, to me, getting this started, so with each meeting, we always get some enthusiasm. With May, we kind of set the stage. I think one point that was made in May that we didn't quite make this time around is one of the participants from FACT said, there's currently 17 copies of me, but I'm only one researcher, so why does there need to be 17 of me? And that was Kelly Shaver, to give him credit, but I think that makes it really the point. If there's only one researcher with only one body of work and one reference point, why does there have to be so many varieties of that individual? So I think that's a good case to be made as well. But really getting going with the data collection, and this is a little bit of a hint towards Angie, what does it look like to get a work group going, the recruitment of the right folks in the room, and then, you know, breaking ground on survey development, to which their draft survey already looks great. Just reviewing the questions last week, the group has done a lot of good work. So is there anything that can inform where you've been, Angie, to what David's trying to get off, David and Cameron are trying to get off the ground here?
I think Cameron's, depiction of the house was just, knowing your focus and where you want to go is the most important.
Was there any kind of special outreach you needed to do to get to take advantage of folks wanting to volunteer and turning that into a working forum?
We the outreach was really through the FDP and as you mentioned earlier, the ERI working group, and picking the working groups and continuing to talk to folks about it. And I think as people reached out, didn't know where they could participate or how to participate, just encouraging them to participate, and we can figure all that stuff out later and utilize expertise where it's needed.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to sink us into a logistics conversation, but I kind of wanted to make that call out because there might be some of your volunteers on here that you should be given a lot of credit for the participation up to now, for the great conversation, and trying to extend that into, this herd data quality, increasing the value of the data that's in herd in order to be more useful to everybody, is a similar discussion for what David's trying to drive as well. So similar folks in that data mindset.
So I think I'll add just a couple things in terms of, again, part of, as this goes forward, we would be trying to identify different stakeholders, of course, right? And some of them may be outside of FDP, right? And in terms of different levels of expertise around researcher profile information. But within FDP, I mean, when you look at the different groups, I mean, we definitely see that there's a need to engage groups like the ERI, right? If you're talking about infrastructure, right, that's important. I mean, there's compliance, right, is an important element of researcher profile information. So, of course, RSTC, so there's a lot of different groups. I think that's part of what we're going to try to do is cast a wide net out there and see who people are also that are personally interested in believing that it's important to have high quality researcher information. Of course, we think that we hope that there will be some technical people that will want to look in things at the data and dive into something like the data assessment. But faculty ultimately is going to be a really important stakeholder in this and making sure that people like Carmen are articulated. So we don't really have one particular perspective in mind. I mean, even faculty, there's different disciplines, right? So I think that my point in all of this is that we're trying to think as broad as we can about the different people we'd want to engage. So anybody that's here that is any bit interested, we would love to have a conversation with you.
Could draw
You
attention
agree,
to
right?
the-
I see you nodding, Carmen, so.
draw attention to the comment there
Yeah.
around the paperwork reduction, like the Privacy Act. I had the opportunity to join the Secure Kickoff last week, and a lot of what you're trying to gather is data and evidence around the challenges of being more effective and efficient and reducing burden around the profile management. But that same kind of conversations unfolding as far as the requirements gathering that's going on in secure. So they're doing a really robust approach to requirements gathering, which was kind of a whiteboard sticky kind of exercise, really led to a voluminous amount of requirements. I can't wait to see how they're distilled into action. But the reason I bring that up is there's a lot of informing that can happen there. I think it's a two-way street. So some of the three circles coming together, I think, will be really beneficial, especially at this stage of the game.
You know, I think sorry, go ahead, Carmen.
My focus is especially on the width of the spectrum of institutions. You know, you have the MITs and the University of California, folks, and then you have the R2 institutions, the smaller institutions. We are competing for the same, mostly for the same money. There are a few differences that goes especially to R2 or non-PhD granting institutions. But what I would like to understand quantitatively, not just from my feeling, is how different is this spectrum? How wide is it? What options exist? And what are best practices that could be suggested? What institutions could learn from one another when they handle this type of information, when they work on proposals? And that is really near and dear to my heart, because I see our younger colleagues struggling to satisfy all these requests that come with the proposal announcements. And that's really where my heart is, to give them if I can, help them getting a better start. So that's really where I'm coming from. And I'm sitting sort of in the middle, not a small institution, not a big institution. And I have seen when I was in a bigger institution what is possible. I have collaborators in really big institutions, and I see all the luxury items, the Lamborghinis they have in their offices. And then I see what the smaller schools have or don't have. And really to quantify that may inform the entire research community.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
I just extension of that. That's where I was going with the secure comments, is that within their requirements, the thing I had to remind myself of is that my frame of mind is a little myopic when it comes to the confines of my institution and what we have available to us to do some of this work. There's a lot of smaller entities out there that struggle just to even comply, whether it's security or just being eligible to participate in a project and that sort of thing. So I think this will also be evidence to that, as far as what it takes to manage some of these things and the size of your institution and the available resources and that sort of thing. So I could really see that coming out in the data.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I mean, with, I think from my perspective at our institution, I mean, we're trying to build infrastructure that'll try to help faculty get federal funds in an efficient way, but institutionally, the faculty are having lots of different pressures. We're in a state with post-tenure review, so they want to get their information correct, not just out in ORCID, but they want to get it correct in our faculty activity reporting system. And so we're hoping that just by looking at the information and understanding even just the structure of it sometimes will help accelerate that information getting to the right places for them, because they may not be thinking about Science CV if they're in the process of being evaluated on an annual basis. They're going to be somewhere else. So again, and we want to make sure we can plan institutionally, like, what are the integrations that we want to build, because they're not going to be built already by somebody else. And so those are the types of things that I think about at our institution as to how this can help.
Okay. Well, I do not see any hands raised, but I did want to take a second just to highlight this while we can. So out on our subcommittee website, a recap of what you heard today, and there'll be the recordings and all that business, but I really wanted to get to the charter, which I think this is a complicated topic that you're trying to launch, and not everybody may have their heads around exactly what we're trying to do. So I wanted to pull this up real quick if I could get to file management and whatever else. The charter itself has two pieces. One is around the initial efforts, which is around that data variance discussion, and then two is getting to the actual survey. So I think you have room for folks that may want to contact you to participate in one way or another. They might be a part of the initial assessment and trying to get things started, which might be around the baseline documentation and the variability understanding versus the survey collection and trying to develop the survey. And then there's always once you've developed the survey and circulated the survey and collected material or evidence, then the parsing of the evidence and turning that into something coherent that folks can work from is always there. So there's probably multiple places where you could encourage folks to go out to this charter and ask themselves if they understand where you're heading, and if they've got any more questions, and then B, how they might want to plug in to where they could be most effective and that sort of thing. So I figured I'd just make that clear that it's out on the website and you can get to it. And then I don't know if you want to add anything more around the actual innards of this, David.
No, I think, like you said, there's a lot to it. I think that just reaching out to either Carmen and I and talking with us about it, I think could be an efficient way for you just to get the orientation of it. But there's a lot going on here. But yeah, no, I think the intention was just to put it out there and have people scrutinize and modify it to draft.
And maybe given the lack of comments, maybe some
Yeah.
folks are thinking that this isn't something that gets off the ground. So maybe it's another way to frame the conversation
Yeah.
here. Does anything jump out at folks that needs attention or clearing up or extra help to move things along and understanding it, that sort of thing? All feedback is welcome. Quiet group. Wrapping up FDP.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll definitely wrap it up at the next session. So thanks everybody who participated today. Quite a few folks joined us. We're down from 140, which is just great. So thanks everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.